Hi, everyone. My name is Claudia Zerlini, and I'm the Senior Coordinator for the HSS Nutrition Education Program called Super Nutrition for All Kids to Eat Right, or SNEAKER. On today's webinar, we're going to talk about nutrition for kids, especially during this time. Our guests today are Laura Gibofsky, who's a pediatric nutritionist at HSS, and Dr. Melanie Prior, who's a primary care pediatrician at HSS. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I guess one of the first questions I'd like to start with is for you, Dr. Prior. What are some of the biggest concerns parents often ask about kids and nutrition?
I think in an overall sense, parents really want to know what makes kids a healthy diet and a balanced diet really at different ages. And so for the younger children, we often get a lot of questions about introducing new foods and kids who may be pickier eaters. And then sometimes for the older kids and teenagers, there's concerns about helping kids really establish good choices independently and making good choices for lifelong habits, especially around like juice and soda consumption and eating breakfast in the morning. And then we do talk with families a bit about adjustments for special diets that either families or kids may prefer, either special diets or substitutions for food allergies, and just thinking about what's safe and healthy. And really, I think the big thing is just keeping in mind there is a wide variation of what is well balanced and healthy for kids. And wonderfully, we have many resources, including our nutritionist, your pediatrician, and many resources online as well.
That's great. So Laura, maybe you could touch on a bit what balanced eating for kids looks like.
Sure. I think Dr. Prior said it best when she said that what it will look like for each age group will differ as far as the quantities. But as far as what we want for all age groups is a balanced diet with a good diet with diet variety from all the different food groups. And so we want to make sure that we're getting good lean proteins, healthy fats, fruits and vegetables, and of course our whole grains and low fat dairy products to make sure that we're building strong bones in those young years.
And so for kids that might not like to eat all the different food groups, how can parents help encourage those eaters to try new foods?
I don't know about any kids who don't like to eat fruits and vegetables. Never heard of that in my entire life. But obviously, I mean, the first thing that we do want to consider is making sure that there isn't an underlying issue. Some kids may have a sensory issue, or we do want to make sure that there isn't something underlying going on that doesn't have to do with not liking a food. So we definitely want to make sure that we're talking about that with the pediatrician and that we might need to refer out to a different specialist. Otherwise, sometimes kids want to show control, and that's actually really important in terms of establishing a healthy relationship with food throughout life. So even just offering the child, do you want an apple or an orange today, can be very helpful instead of sometimes saying, what do you want to eat? Because a child, they may not be able to figure that out, but giving them some boundaries can be very helpful versus just open-ended questions. The other thing is making sure that we're encouraging kids to be part of the meal planning process. You can definitely, right now, we don't necessarily want the kids to go to the supermarket. We can definitely encourage them to get involved in meal planning, or even giving them some small tasks in the kitchen, like washing vegetables or setting the table, can really help them be involved in mealtime and be more interested in the foods that they're wanting to eat. So that can be helpful as well.
That's great. So in the event that you might not be able to get your child to eat any vegetables, they might supplement with a multivitamin. And maybe Dr. Prior, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So with vitamins, it really doesn't replace all the nutrients that kids get from their regular diet. And the best source of all these vitamins that Laura was mentioning is really to encourage food from all food groups and a wide variety of foods. For some kids, a multivitamin may be appropriate if they have very restrictive diets, and certainly kids who have certain medical conditions. But all of these things should be discussed with your pediatrician. But in general, kids who eat a wide, varied diet get all the vitamins they need from that.
And that also is true for adults. I think it's important to mention that the children also are modeling their adults in their lives. So the same is actually true. If we're eating a well-balanced diet, like Dr. Prior was saying, with all of our different food groups and a good diversity, that actually kind of covers us in terms of what our body is getting, and our bodies are amazing, and it will actually get rid of the stuff that we don't need. So we don't need these mega doses of things that we see on TV or anything like that, and especially concerning in children, because we don't want to cause any accidents or dangerous amounts that they could be ingesting in those products as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so when we think about the nutrients that kids need, what are the most important nutrients that parents should ensure their child is getting?
Yeah, I mean, so especially at hospital for special surgery, we obviously make sure that the child's calcium and vitamin D are taken care of, because it is important for bone health. And that's, I make sure that the kids who I work with understand that. I think it is one of the biggest secrets that kids don't learn until they're a little bit older, but we only get one set of bones for life. And so making sure that we're building them now is really, really important. And when you explain that to the 6-year-olds, the 7-year-old, they think it's the coolest thing in the world. And it is, because you want to make these really strong bones now. And so when you explain that to them, they actually want to engage in it and want to build the strong bones, so that when they're older, they can tell their friends. So I always say it's the secret that I want you to tell all of your friends, that you can build the strongest bones. And so obviously, again, we talked about varied diet, and making sure you're doing that can make sure that you're getting all of the nutrients. I would say of all of the nutrients, vitamin D may be the one that is the caveat, that it actually is a little bit harder to get it from food. So that is one that you would want to speak to your pediatrician about, and they can test to see adequacy. But again, it's going to be very specific for each child and each age group. So it's definitely something that you want to have that discussion with your child's pediatrician.
Is a vitamin D test something that might normally come up in a primary care visit?
Yes, it definitely is. For some of the younger children, it's actually part of the New York State guidelines to be testing vitamin D at well visits. And then in kids who are at greater risk, we also test. And certainly kids who have any fractures, have problems with bone healing, that's definitely something we think about, and then supplement appropriately.
That's great. Is that something that parents might be concerned about outside of a well visit, or there might be any signs or symptoms that a child might be experiencing if they have low vitamin D or calcium?
It's definitely possible. I think thankfully at the levels that we see and the severity of some of those deficiencies, the symptoms are pretty subtle, but the bone density and fracture risk is definitely one thing.
And so while we're on it, Laura, I know we talk a lot about calcium with our sneaker program, and I'm always surprised to learn how much calcium we actually need in a day, and how that can actually be perhaps a lot. Can you talk a little bit about the calcium requirements, and maybe touch on how other sources of calcium outside of dairy?
Sure. So I think it is important to think about overall calcium requirements, but I think, we're not all out there with calculators and, adding things up and saying, okay, I got 350 milligrams here, I got 250 here, and things like that. So in general, we recommend to try to have 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 dairy serve or high calcium rich foods. And again, that doesn't necessarily only need to come from dairy products. I had to correct myself there. There are other forms out there. Soy milk, almond milk, they can have calcium if your child has a problem with dairy. Again, it is not all of those milks may be fortified. So that's something that you want to look on the container. And the other thing that I like to remind everybody is that you want to give that milk a good shake, because they can settle to the bottom. And so shaking it up can make sure that it gets dispersed, and that when you're drinking it, it's not all in the last glass that you have, but rather done throughout. So that's an important one. There are things, you can also get it in dark leafy greens will be a good source of calcium. But again, just trying to make sure, instead of maybe doing romaine lettuce, try to choose spinach or something like that. That can be a nice swap just to up the calcium content a little bit. But again, it is something that I like to make sure that the doctors that you're talking to your pediatrician about, just to make sure if you're even concerned, or that if your child isn't tolerating dairy, because that is something that we're seeing, that they're having other high calcium rich foods in their diet, which can still be done very safely.
It's really good to know. And while we're on it, are there any nutrients that are really essential to come from food, and perhaps aren't as effective when they come from a multivitamin?
All nutrients are essential to come from food. That's, the supplement industry actually came around much later. So really, again, just encouraging a well-balanced diet with all the major food groups is really the best sense of resource that we all have to do. And I know sometimes it can be challenging, but sometimes if you just do a little bit of planning or even, seek out an expert. We are here and dietitians are doing telehealth visits during this time. So that's an important resource for you to know about. I always say, the internet can be your best friend or your worst enemy. And sometimes now even going on the internet to even find recipes or different things as ways to kind of get kids excited about new foods can also be, you can use this time to your advantage as well.
Absolutely. So while we're talking about this particularly challenging time, how can parents ensure nutrient-dense meals, especially when we're thinking about maximizing pantry staples or things that we have more readily on hand, like shelf-stable foods?
Yeah, that is a great question. It's a question that I'm definitely getting a lot more now. Mm-hmm. And so, if getting to the supermarket is a problem, there are some programs that are available. A lot of public health programs or even your local food bank that can make food available. But if you are able to get out to the supermarket, I say start with your fresh items first. Even cutting up your vegetables and freezing them yourself can be a great strategy. Then you can go to the frozen section and stack up on frozen veggies is another, but this way, if you have leftovers, because obviously we don't want those perishables to go to waste, you can buy more and then freeze them yourself. Canned vegetables are a good option and canned fruit. You just want to make sure that you drain them and try to find, for the vegetables, ones that no salt added. And for the fruits, you want to make sure that they're canned in water versus syrup is a good option to use. And then obviously, other pantry staples we want to think about is beans is a great one, either the dried ones or in the cans. And you can use that whether you're adding it to a pasta dish with some vegetables. You can add some chickpeas is a good way to kind of incorporate some good protein. Or you can buy them dry and rehydrate them yourself at home. They can really go a long way. It's amazing how $1 or $1.15 of dried beans can really last a long time. You can make different bean patties with them. So there's other things that you can do with them. The other thing I always talk about is spices. We think about the pantry staples like the beans and things like that, but things will taste better with spices. So making sure that you have, whether it's the garlic powder, the onion powder, curries, different things. And there's a lot of different spices that are available on the market. And so it's a nice way to kind of zhuzh up those pantry staples kind of things and to make them a little bit more interesting. The other thing, things like bread, they can be frozen and things can be frozen. I always tell everybody food safety is as always important regardless of what's going on. So I encourage, and I've taught everyone in my family this, you put the date of when you bought it so that, the freezer can get packed with things. So this way you don't have to wonder, how old is this? Do I have to smell it? And all those things. You can just look at the package and see, oh, well, this is from this date, and make sure you put the year. That's very important because you don't want to have something from 2 years ago, but say, oh, it was from May, but it could be from May 2017. We don't want that in the freezer.
Admittedly, that happened to me recently, actually. I was like, oh, this is recent, January. And then I thought about it a little more, and it was probably January 2018. So
yeah.
That's
and
great.
Another thing that I also encourage, you can get it online at the CDC website has it, or you can just Google it. But I encourage people, especially if you have a magnetic freezer or refrigerator, you can find a food safety kind of picture to put up with the appropriate temperatures for things and also the appropriate shelf life in terms of how long things should be in the refrigerator, how long they should be in the freezer. It's something that I printed out for all my family members. I don't want to say it's for a birthday because that would make me seem like the world's most boring family member, but it's super easy. You can print it out, and this way it's always there, and you don't have to go with the test of, oh, when did I buy this?
Laura, the gift of safety is a great birthday gift.
I agree. I think it's the best gift I can give everybody.
When we're thinking about canned versus frozen versus fresh, does that really change the nutritional value of foods?
It will to a degree, but so that fresh is always the best, I say. Then I say then you would go to frozen for certain things, the vegetables, because again, they're usually picked at their peak and flash frozen, so it does preserve a lot of the nutrients. And then canned, you still will get nutrients, but again, it's still important to include those things. And so what you may not get from one, the whole point, and that's why we always talk about a varied diet, maybe what you're lacking in one area, you can then kind of pick up on in another area. So that's why the varied diet becomes so important, because you're kind of building on all of those concepts together.
Absolutely. So aside from eating, another thing that we've heard from parents, especially during COVID is that schedules have kind of been interrupted. So I just want to take a little bit of time.
Work now.
I did want to take a little bit of time to touch on schedules. And I heard from some parents that they're having really difficulty with sleep schedules. And so while this isn't directly food related, are there any foods or even routines that parents can use to help kids with sleep? And then another question we received is it safe for children to possibly take sleep supplements?
Mm-hmm. No, those are all great questions, and this really is a hard time with kids' routines and sleep schedules. Really, the best thing to maintain a sleep schedule is to maintain a daytime routine. So as much as possible during this time, still trying to keep to a consistent schedule with a consistent wake-up time, consistent meal times, and then just maintaining a bedtime routine. So for younger kids, those bedtime routines include, brushing up, reading a book, and having a consistent bedtime. And then for older kids, especially minimizing screen time, especially as we're all at home right now. So reducing the amount of TV, video games, especially in that hour before bedtime. So the sleep hygiene, as we call it, that's really the most important thing. Foods potentially could play a role in that in terms of bedtime snack being a part of a kid's routine. And Laura can maybe speak a little bit more to it, but trying to combine something that's a little bit of fiber, a little bit of protein, a light snack in that hour before bedtime for younger kids also. And then the other part of the question in terms of sleep supplements. So one that we get asked about a lot is melatonin, which is basically a synthetic form of a natural hormone that is used to help with sleep onset. And it's sold over the counter, so it's not truly regulated by the FDA, but in general, it's safe in children over 3. But it's also something that should be talked about with your pediatrician because there are specific indications for it. And sometimes it's not necessarily the best fix just in the short term in a stressful situation like this. It especially can be helpful in kids who have other neurodevelopmental disorders, so kids with autism or ADHD, but definitely talk with your pediatrician about any sort of supplements.
Really individualized for the child.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the FDA approval of melatonin. So I'm wondering if you could touch on, this brings us back to vitamins, but really the role of the FDA in regulating supplements and vitamins and what we should be looking for, especially when we're giving a vitamin to our children.
So definitely, again, talking with your pediatrician about any of these issues, because there are a lot of over-the-counter supplements that may be safe, but we just don't have a lot of information or data on them in kids. So it's sold and it's available, but it's important to really have that individualized discussion.
Absolutely. And then in terms of mealtime schedules, Laura, I'm not sure if you have any tips or ideas about maintaining consistent eating and maintaining a meal schedule.
Yeah, it's actually, Dr. Prior had mentioned that when she spoke about sleep hygiene and obviously, maintaining the ritual around bedtime, but like she said, it kind of goes more into that and maintaining a schedule throughout the day and staying on task, because you can't kind of wait till the end of the day to kind of hope that it all comes together, and staying on track throughout the days is as just as important, if not more, to making sure that the child can go to sleep as part of its normal routine on a nightly basis. For the child and for mom and dad, it's equally important. And so making sure that you are maintaining those routine meal times. And I say routine because it doesn't mean a normal meal time for me may not be a normal meal time for them. It's just making sure that it's consistent for that family or for the child. And, we all have these devices with us all day now. And so sometime even setting that timer, kids aren't in school, they normally have scheduled periods, but to kind of maybe set off an alarm to kind of, so they know that it's meal time and that you don't get lost in the day, and that kind of then track all the calories, because that can affect sleep also. And like Dr. Prior was saying, in the same way, you know, sometimes kids may be hungry, and maybe if they had a very early lunch, they're having trouble going to sleep because their bellies are growling because they're hungry and they're growing. And so that's something that we definitely want to consider, and we don't want any child to have to go to sleep hungry. And that's something. And so making sure that the meals and the snacks are spaced out appropriately can make sure that they're not thinking about that versus they can think about going to sleep and waking up for the next day.
Mm-hmm. Is there any gold standard to how many meals or how many snacks a day you should include in your schedule?
That's a great question. And as Dr. Prior was saying, a lot of this is very individualized. I mean, when we think of the gold standard, we think of 3 meals a day with 1 to 2 snacks in between. But again, it may be different for each child and for each family. So it's something that you want to work out, because I always say, you know, for me, a meal, a snack, it's all kind of how you frame it and what that means to you. And so if you want to call it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you want to call it ABs, whatever it is, it's just making sure that adequate nutrition is reached throughout the day in appropriate time periods and in appropriate amounts, like we said before.
Absolutely. I know my snacks kind of borderline meals sometimes. It really depends on how hungry.
Yeah, it's all just how you word it. And so as long as you're hitting all the key nutrients to make sure that you're building a balanced diet to support growth and development, that's really what is the most important thing. And with that, obviously kids' schedules now might be a little bit different. They may not be participating in their daily sports and things like that. So I do think that that's something to think about when we are thinking about snacks, because kids may not need the same kind of snack as they needed. I am not implying that the idea of physical activity should be taken away, because we still want to make sure that kids are still being physically active during this time. And maybe Dr. Prior can speak to that as well. Those recommendations have not changed. In fact, we want kids to continue to be physically active, whether it's in the house doing different activities, or if it's in a safe way where it can be done socially distant outside. But it just might be different in the sense that they're not playing basketball as like a team sport, or that they're not at their baseball games. That is something that a lot of times the kids are very hungry and they might need a bigger snack. So that's just the one thing that might need some adjusting. But other than that, again, I want to highlight physical activity is just more, and that goes back to what we were talking about with routine. While the kids may not be doing team sports, we still want to make sure that it is part of the child's day from a physical well-being and also from a mental well-being as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the physical activity during the day, that's one of the things that helps with a good sleep routine also, circling back to that.
So about how many minutes or hours a day should kids be getting? And I know it probably varies depending on age, but when we're thinking about the ideal amount of physical activity, what should parents be considering?
Yeah, exactly. It does vary based on age, but really at least 30 minutes of some sort of moderate to vigorous activity. And that can be explained to parents, really just something that gets the heart moving and gets you breathing heavy, gets your heart pumping. And so it's definitely more of a challenge with some of these indoor activities, but that's still the goal for kids.
I've seen a lot of like Zoom dance classes going on, and parents getting really creative to make sure their kids stay moving.
It is amazing what all you can do in the apartment.
It's true. And even for ourselves, I didn't realize how much, what kind of workout I could get just in a small space.
And Claudia, I have noticed what you said with Zoom, there are even some what we would consider adult classes. They've been kind of catering to do child activities. And some of these instructors that we think about have been making some child-friendly workouts to kind of do at home. And they even included their own kids in the videos at home. So it is nice. And I'm sure if you again, this is where the internet, I always tell people, stay off the internet when you're looking for health advice, because obviously you want to seek out a medical professional. That is a dark hole that you don't want to go down. But as far as finding recipes or workout videos, things that we know won't be harmful, obviously you still want to pair it with, talk to somebody who can guide you in the appropriate direction. But looking up a different workout class or fun dance videos for kids to do, that's, as long as it's done in a safe way, not done that could be harmful for anybody in the house, it's a great way to get them moving.
Definitely.
And so we're talking a lot about physical activity to make sure our kids are growing, and balanced eating to make sure our kids are growing healthy and strong. But what should a parent do during this time if they feel like their child isn't meeting important growth milestones?
Mhm. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out to your doctors during this time. So yes, there are a lot of things going on in the world that are a priority, but children's growth is always a priority. So it's still really important to stay in touch with your pediatrician. Most visits are doing either phone, or most offices are doing either phone consults or even video visits. And so these more longitudinal concerns can still be addressed in a discussion. And fortunately, a lot of the subspecialists as well are available. And so a lot of things can be referred and discussed with multiple providers if there's any questions or concerns.
Okay, so thank you both so much. That's all the time we have for today. A lot of great information about kids and nutrition, not only in general, but also during this challenging time. Thank you again for tuning in. And if you have any questions or would like to learn more about HSS, you can visit us at hss.edu. Bye.